Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast, brought to you by City Current and powered by Lipscomb & Pitts Insurance. This show shares personal stories and insight from those who are giving back and making a difference, so we can learn and do the same. We cover life lessons, business advice, passion, and purpose. Now here's our host, Jeremy Park.
Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We get to cover marketing, branding, city building, some of our favorite topics. We have David French. He's a brand ambassador. We have the Memphis Brand Initiative is the formal. He's the president and chief marketing officer for, it's a newly formed nonprofit, but the Memphis Brand Initiative. So we'll start there and then we'll dive in from everything from MTV to working with our parks. I mean, you have a lot of stories and a lot of grounds we get to cover. So David, how are you doing?
Doing great. Just glad to be here. Glad to be here with you, and most importantly, glad to be here in Memphis.
And I know you're not sleeping much because you have a young one in the household.
Little baby Josephine, aka JoJo, brand new, bring your soul Memphian here, and we could not be happier. The community has been awesome, and yes, I am not sleeping, nor is my wife. But we're here, and so I apologize if I sound drowsy, but it's been a fun ride so far.
Well, we appreciate you coming on. So let's start out. Give us a little bit of your backstory in terms of where you grew up.
Grew up all over the country. This is the 7th city I've lived in. Grew up in Phoenix, Buffalo, Philadelphia, then New York, Los Angeles, DC, and now Memphis. And the benefit of that is I've gotten to meet a lot of people, experience a lot of different cities, and get to have now the insights of seeing, what really works in some cities and what doesn't, and how that affects perception and marketing and branding of a city, a place, and an experience. And so I've loved each and every one of those cities in different ways, but I truly, my heart belongs to Memphis right now.
Yeah. And so talk about on your end, because as I mentioned, you've got, just from what you mentioned there, you've got an eclectic background in terms of the cities, but also too, with a lot of your marketing, communications, building. So let's start with what was your major in college? Let's start there and let's kind of work our way through.
I just had this conversation with students at the U of M earlier this week that are very terrified about their majors. Yeah, I was a marketing major with a minor in communications, so I'm a little bit built to do this. I went to Villanova University in Philadelphia. Go Wildcats.
Getting shout-outs. That's good.
I love my Memphis Tigers too, though. Don't get me wrong. I do. But, I think I'm more the anomaly than the rule. I think, especially when it comes to marketing, to be perfectly honest with you, I knew I wanted to get into business school, but I am really bad at accounting and economics and that kind of finance and that kind of stuff. And so while I can manage a budget, I really fell in love with marketing. I fell in love with telling stories and reputation management and brand, and really less on the kind of hard sales. I know I would never be good at being the brand guy for Clorox, right? That's not my thing. But to tell the story about a cause, a mission, or a place, or an experience, I think that I fell in love with, and that kind of found me early on at college.
So what was your first job out of college?
I got 2 weeks to move to New York City. I landed an internship at a PR firm called Reuter Finn, and they had this awesome program. It was 4 months, and it was kind of like try out your legs in PR. And if you like it, we may hire you, and if you don't, no harm, no foul, you can take off. And I loved that because I was very non-committal in all parts of my life at that point. So I was like, okay, well, let's go try that out. And lucky enough, I fell into that. And that was back in the day when you were reaching out to reporters, you weren't just texting them or shooting them emails. You're picking up the phone and you're calling probably 30 reporters a day, and you're pitching everything from biotechnology to digital and music, and I was lucky enough to fall into some clients that I really loved, and it ended up working out. So I ended up staying there for about a year.
What was either one of your favorite kind of experiences with that, or clients? What was a fun moment that stood out, or a good lesson learned?
Yeah, I would say where I found my stride was the marrying of anytime you have a passion, a personal passion, you can marry it into your work. that's a good thing, right? Because you end up being good at your work. So I'm a musician. I played the drums for a long, long time. And so I ended up landing into a lot of digital music clients. And so I like technology as well. And so it was right around 2000, and it was during the dot-com kind of bubble, and there was a lot of technology things happening. And so I ended up getting a lot of those clients. I would say probably the most interesting one I got was it was this client called timesquare2000.com. They were actually the website for the Times Square Festival for the change of the century, the millennium.
Yeah.
And so there I am all of a sudden in Times Square for that moment, leading this kind of huge event and all the media that was there for it. And that's where I learned, you're going to get thrown into the deep end, but sometimes trial by fire is the best way to learn. And so I learned a lot from those experiences, and they helped. That experience and many others got me really comfortable with events and big events, and I think that's what started to pave the way toward the future parts of my career.
So tying in the passion for music, digital, media, there's a convergence there that has 3 letters, MTV.
Yeah.
And that's
back
a big
when
part
it
of your
stood for
story.
something. Yeah.
Back when there were music videos.
Yeah, back when
but I mean, I think that's a cool piece of this story. So talk about working with MTV and even how you got to MTV.
Yeah, so there was actually a job posting. It was in Billboard magazine, senior publicist. I was an assistant account executive at the time. I was an AE, so I was like, there's no way I'm going to get this gig. But it was for MTVI, which was the digital portfolio for all of MTV Network. So MTV.com, VH1.com, Nick.com, Nickelodeon.com, all of those. And I'd done a year at the agency. I knew I didn't like being the hired gun, if that makes sense. I like to be tied to the brand rather than working for many, many brands. So, and then you're a music guy, right? And at that time, if you remember, it's 2001, so like music was doing some really interesting things. Like the rap rock like mix was happening, like pop was coming back in a really interesting way. There was all sorts of things happening, so I was really interested in it, so I applied. I went through about 5 interviews. They literally made me do everything from a timed writing sample of writing a press release in front of them to...
Was there any trivia question on like bands or artists?
I don't think so.
Did they make you play the drums too?
Yeah, I wish they did. But it was funny because I remember getting some heat because when I ended up getting the job, and I actually told my boss, she had applied for it too.
Oh.
So that there was some consternation about that. So we managed to work through it, but we that was one of those opportunities where you just, I just remember saying, listen, if you give me this opportunity, I promise you I'm going to give you 10,000% and I will not disappoint you. And lucky enough, they gave me the shot.
Well, and so looking at this, even on your end, Vice President Communications for MTV, title-wise, but give us, maybe 1 or 2 fun moments, because obviously working at MTV, you're exposed to just so many unique experiences. And when you talk about even Times Square for the 2000, that's obviously a huge experience. But being around those sort of environments, it's just, you have a lot of neat stories, a lot of access to a lot of amazing people. Give us a couple that stand out and put a smile on your face.
I don't know if they all put a smile on my face.
Or a frown. What are the cocktail parties that you tell?
Ulcer, maybe. No, I mean, so I started at MTVI, and then I was there for about 2 years, and then then they moved me over to Network, over to MTV, where I was doing MTV, MTV2, and then I just kind of worked my way up. I ended up spending a year in LA, and came back to New York as vice president. So, there's all sorts of stories. I ended up doing all of our events. So you can imagine the red carpets at the Video Music Awards, the Movie Awards, loading 400 members of the media in very tight spaces is always lots of fun. I guess one of my memorable stories there was, so talent comes, but they don't always come with a publicist. So we have a fleet of publicists, right, that you stand at the top of the carpet, and when someone comes out of their ride, you get assigned to them, and then you walk them down on the carpet, and you make sure they do all the interviews that they can do. And I remember one particular year we were at the Opera House in New York City, and I had Missy Elliott. So I'm walking Missy Elliott down the carpet, and what was hard about that in particular was it's my responsibility to get Missy Preston, right? Like to get her. And so at the time, Destiny's Child was in front of me. So you have Beyonce and crew. And then behind me on the carpet was NSYNC. So you got just, all right. So now these guys are walking down the carpet and they have very large bodyguards, right? Like big guys, right? And here I am with Missy, and Missy's tiny. Like she's barely, I mean, you guys can't see me on the podcast, but she's barely up to my shoulder. So I remember I was trying to get, Pat somebody, it was Entertainment Tonight or Access Hollywood, like I was trying to get his attention, and I had the show script in my hand, right? And so it's my job to get Missy pressed, so I literally raised my hand up to get Pat's attention. Pat O'Brien, is that it? Pat's attention, and I didn't realize it, but I do that, and it looks like I'm about to hit Beyonce in the face, right? And so immediately bodyguards come. It was intense. I was just like, hey, I work for MTV. No harm, no foul. But Beyonce literally went like you guys can't see it, but she ducked because she thought I was about to hit her on the head. When I was just trying to get Missy on Access Hollywood. So Beyonce, I'm sorry. I was no harm, no foul. Yeah. And then the other one I'll just tell really quick was you may or may not like me for this, but I also I did a lot of PR for a lot of shows, including Punk'd and Pimp My Ride, and Jackass was one of those. I ended up getting like all the guy shows, all the music shows and all the guy shows. So that was cool because I had like Headbangers
like
Ball
Johnny
too
Knoxville
and stuff
and
like
all those guys.
So yeah, like Johnny and Bam and Steve-O, like know those guys. And there's a spin-off of that show called Wild Boys. And Wild Boys was Steve-O and Chris Pontius traveling the globe, interacting with indigenous peoples and wildlife. And so I actually went with them to Costa Rica and ended up going with a reporter whose name is Jillian Flynn at Entertainment Weekly at the time. And we were cruising through the backcountry of Costa Rica, middle of the night, thunderstorms falling down ravines, and looking for vampire bats because Steve-O and Pontius were dressed as vampires. And so, and I remember Jillian like pulling me on the shoulder and be like, "Dave, where is there a bathroom nearby? Like, where can I?" And I was like, "I'm sorry, like this is the nature of the job." I've come to know now that Jillian wrote Gone Girl. And has done amazing things, but it's those moments in time where you find you don't realize you're with these amazing people doing these ridiculous things, and they lead to some awesome memories. So I always say I'll forever bleed MTV. They will always be family to me, and it was an amazing job to have in your 20s.
Well, and I think that's, to me, the entertainment industry, it's wild because you have crazy experiences that you almost can't even share unless you're around people who experience them with you, because to go through them, in many cases they seem like a movie, and so as you start telling people in other places, like, yeah, whatever,
right,
but they're memories you'll always cherish and carry with you. Talk about, though, on that same thread, I think what makes even the job that you're talking about difficult is that people see the fun side of it. So they see the Missy Elliott, and you get to do the red carpets, and you get to be Times Square and all these amazing access opportunities. But yet the amount of sacrifice you have to go to do that, I think, is something that people don't see. Yeah. We had one of the guest speakers, Justin Ford, said a long time ago, said, success is formed in the shadows. And it's like that's the stuff you never see, is all the hard work and the sacrifice to get to enjoy those moments. Yeah. Talk about it from that perspective of just some of the sacrifice and kind of what you had to go through and yet give up to be able to do some of that, because those are hard jobs.
Those are hard jobs, long hours, and so you end up, and it goes by fast. So while it's a hell of a ride, you end up you miss family time. Unfortunately, during that time, my father got really ill and passed away, and you regret that you're on this crazy train and you can't. I was in Los Angeles, like you can't break away, and So I learned a valuable lesson. I learned two valuable lessons from those experiences. One, work-life balance. No matter how hard or how intense the job is, you got to find that time, because you got to pace yourself, and you got to make sure that you stay true to you. And then I would say also, it's like, a lot of my colleagues, and I was very guilty of this in my 20s, you got to stop and appreciate the moment. Like, you got to stop and appreciate, holy crap, I'm walking Missy Elliott down the red carpet, right? But at the time, you kind of fly through those moments. Now, in retrospect, you look back and you really appreciate it. But I think life is the journey, it truly is. And so those are some of the things that I've grown to appreciate, having had those really intense experiences.
It's different now because with social media, everybody takes a picture or makes a moment of everything, right? So you can catalog it nowadays. Did you do that then? Because I'm always amazed, with LA, because I was trying to think the Razor phones and stuff like that. I mean, at that point, but you didn't really have access to easily take a picture with everything. So my point is, I look back on those moments and I don't really have many pictures. I don't have many. So unless I can tell you about it, there weren't really many moments that I could show you necessarily. Did you do?
Yeah.
Were you cognizant of that?
I was also the guy, I had colleagues of mine at MTV that would have their office or their cube with their pictures with all the talent.
Yeah.
And I was very anti that. I was I'm not going to be that guy. That's not my thing. So I have pictures of me and my staff and my friends, but at the time they were more for me. I wasn't, especially as a publicist, I was always very much about being behind the scenes, not in front of it. And that was always kind of a rule of mine. I had a boss early on who said, Dave, you never want to see your name in print except when it's after the words paid to the order of, right? And so I was like, I try to follow that, and make sure that, and it's part of the reason why MBI isn't known to a lot of people yet, and it's because the MBI is not the hero in this, it's Memphis.
Yeah.
And so we're really making sure Memphis is the story. And it's frankly why I haven't done a lot of interviews yet, because I want to make sure that people see what's happening here in Memphis. And so I tend to stay behind the scenes. I never really broadcast a lot of what I'm doing.
Talk about, before we switch over in the national parks, but talk about trust, because in the entertainment industry, trust is a huge, huge thing. Mm-hmm. And you're dealing with very influential people, very prominent people, lots of money. They want to know they can trust you. Mm-hmm. So share maybe kind of that side of just building trust. And
yeah, I mean, at MTV at that time, the nice thing about that was that we were like a family, and you had to build that trust, and you built it through, your reputation in that you deliver, right? You can deliver on what you're being asked to do, but also that you're responsible with people's knowledge or information or secrets, and that's on the celebrity side, where you're exposed and you see things that the rest of the world never needs to see or know about, right? Or you're working with the CEO, Van Toffler, and I were just exchanging messages on Facebook today, actually, and so you stay in touch with these folks. And it's because you build up a level of trust, and that's important. I would say that continues today. I tell my team this every day, not every day, because they're getting tired of me saying it. But when we first started, I said relationships are our currency, right? It's not dollars. It's about the people you meet. It's about the relationships that you build, because you never know what that relationship's going to develop into and the dividends it will pay down the road. And it's happened to me time and time again, where you end up having a relationship and it turns into something magical that you had never forecast or foreseen. And I can tell you there's been countless times now that those MTV relationships that I built have paid off for both parks and for Memphis, just in the short time that I've been here, which has been amazing.
Well, and always too, you go through those and you never know, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, to your point, all these relationships, you go through those experiences, you never know how they're going to pay off, and all of a sudden you look back and it's like, oh yeah, I had that experience because it led me to this, and now I can do this that wouldn't have been possible had you not gone through it before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Share a little bit about the National Park Foundation, because you ended up being Senior Vice President, Marketing Communications, Corporate Partnerships with the National Park Foundation, and a lot of really neat moments out of that, but also too tying kind of the media side of what you did as well. which makes it unique in terms of being able to do some really cool things, especially like PBS and national marketing.
Yeah. I mean, I think, so what happened there was, so I had spent 8 years at MTV, and, I had done both coasts, and I just got to the moment where I was like, I feel like I've done everything I want to do, right? Like, I've done the business side, I helped launch networks, I had done a lot of the programming, and what I ended up falling really in love with was the pro-social work we were doing, the youth voter activation with Choose or Lose, or Fight for Your Rights, which was about domestic violence, or Break the Addiction, which was about the environment. And so very passionate about the environment. So I just left. I left MTV. And
so you didn't have anything lined up?
Didn't have anything lined up in Washington, D.C. I said, I'm done. I'm tapping out.
Wow.
Scary. I don't recommend that, but I did it. And I moved to Washington, D.C., probably foolishly at the time. I was like, well, I got all this MTV experience. But the reality was, in D.C., entirely different market and city, they didn't know what to do with me, and whether that was on the Hill or the PR firms down there, they knew I had great experience, but how did that apply to them in the political world? So that was humbling. That was 9 months of hustle to say, okay, where am I going to land next? And luckily enough, I landed at the national parks. And at the time, I was kind of lukewarm on it. And again, they didn't know what to do with me. That my title there was executive. They didn't even know what to call me. I was just like, just come in.
I'm just an executive.
I guess I'm an executive. Okay, and I was like, well, let's try this, let's try that. I think for them, it was about building relevance. And that's something, I've kind of prided my career on is how you indoctrinate and embrace a new generation and make your brand relevant to them. And national parks, frankly, was going through a little bit of a crisis there. I mean, you go to visit a national park a few years ago and you would see largely older Caucasian visitors, right? And, our demographics are vastly changing, and so we needed to do something about that. And that was a place I knew I could apply my skill set in appealing to millennials and younger generations and inviting them to experience these amazing places. I mean, national parks don't just tell the story of these awesome landscapes like the Grand Canyon or Yellowstone or Yosemite. There's, I think, 417 national parks around the country, and each one of them tells a powerful story about our history, our legacy, about people, about this country, and whether it's our geography or how we've come to know each other, or even culturally now, you think about great national parks that stand up for the LGBT community and women and races. That's important. That's work that still needs to be done. I was really proud to be part of that.
I think, though, when you look at marketing at the root, it's storytelling, but it's also problem solving. And so even your ability, like you said, to kind of jump in, and even with the title of vague executive, where you don't really know, and there's a lot of gray area, for someone like you, it can also be wildly exciting because you can look around and say, okay, wait a second, what are the stories? What are the problems? How do we connect these dots? And ultimately then how do we execute and do something with it?
Yeah.
And I think that's, even when you look at the Memphis Brand Initiative, MBI, you have to be able to step back and see a big picture. But then to your point, you also have to be able to 417 different stories. How does each one of those have its own brand identity? Mm-hmm. But then in the larger scale, obviously build up to this great experience as a whole. So,
and how does it all connect?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and I think too, really good examples of that and in marrying MTV to parks was, the White House is a national park. Some people don't know that. And so we would always end up handling their events, not like dignitary stuff, but the Easter egg roll, the National Christmas tree lighting. And when I showed up, the National Christmas tree lighting was literally on this wooden stage, and the president would walk out and wave with like Santa, and I think they had John Cicada, I think, was the artist. No disrespect to the John Cicada fans out there, right? But, so this is like 2008. And I just looked at it, I was like, I think we can do something with this and not only just make it relevant for the country, but also make it relevant for parks, like in a way where we can start to tell the park story in a more national, global way. And so I call my friends at MTV, Alex Coletti, who produced all of the Unplugs and many video music awards, and say, hey, Alex, come down here and take a look at this. And 8 years later, we built the show into a nationally televised broadcast, ended up selling it to Hallmark for a significant chunk of change that now goes back every year to support the national parks. And integrated in that is we're telling the national park story every year, which is great. And it helps facilitate donations and support. And the other example I'll give, and I'm really proud of, was, having been in New York on 9/11, one of the national parks that we were able to help create at the National Park Foundation was the Flight 93 National Memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And that took about $40 million to raise that money to create that place. But to be able to create I ended up creating an event with President Bush, President Clinton, Speaker Boehner, all these different dignitaries, and to help finally raise the money to put that place into the history books. So now you have this powerful experience when you go there. Like those are the rewarding moments and memories that you have when you can merge, yes, your experience, but also that you're having a lasting impact for the country.
Absolutely. Talk about Memphis, coming to Memphis, being a part of the Memphis Brand Initiative, and obviously there's a lot of legwork that went into even creating this, but give us a little of that backstory, and then we'll talk a lot about what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so the Memphis Brand Initiative is really the brainchild of two guys. Mike Glenn, former chief marketing officer at FedEx, terrific guy, and Rick Shadyac at LSAC. And to their credit, those two gentlemen run massive, globally recognized, iconic brands. And so they understand the value that brings. And they together said, well, why do we not treat Memphis the same way? And we should. And we should honor our community that way. We should shepherd our story, our narrative that way. And so I was coming on to about 8 years at National Parks and led them through their centennial anniversary, and we got through the Find Your Park campaign and really did some great work there. And I got a phone call from a friend who had recently moved here to Memphis and said, hey, I think they're looking for somebody to help spearhead this Memphis Brand Initiative. Will you take the phone call? And I always take the phone call. And phone call turned into a visit, and I almost immediately fell in love with the place. I think this city, it's more than a city, and it's more than a brand, and that's why I really took the gig. It's an experience here, and it is so unique. I don't often think Memphians realize how special it is.
Absolutely. And
I think that's why I am here at this moment in time, especially, and a little bit of a believer in faith, but I believe I'm here to bring that perspective a little bit and shine a spotlight that this is an amazing city with amazing people doing world-shaking things. And with now my background and experience and the talents of some tremendous Memphians, it's our job to tell those stories and to shine that spotlight.
What did you see outside of the music and the barbecue, the food? I mean, you've got obviously those kind of legacy pieces with Memphis, but for you coming in, what were some of the things that you thought right off the bat, these are stories that we're not telling that need to be told, experiences? What were some of the things that stood out to you as, okay, these are things that we're missing the mark on?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think Memphis, and our research tells us this, is really known for two things, Elvis and barbecue. And we love Elvis and we love barbecue. I'll probably have barbecue after this. But when I got here and I was going around town, and I was either my Uber driver or I was sitting with somebody at a restaurant, and they'd be telling these stories of people here in Memphis that continue to create change, right? Whether it is the startup or the artist or the dancer and what's interesting about Memphis is that these individuals can have a pronounced impact here, whereas in New York City, all the layers, right? And yet here, the opportunity to create change, whether that's through a nonprofit like Youth Villages or yes, and then there's St. Jude, and then there's Le Bonheur, but it's so much more than that. I mean, it's the fact that we're at this epicenter of technology and agriculture that only can happen really here in Memphis. I mean, why? We have to tell that story. That is a total miss not to tell that story, that we are creating music in new and different and powerful ways, and artists are coming home to Memphis, And yes, it's blues, but it's more than that, right? I mean, you are actually seeing artists leaving, no disrespect to my friends in Nashville and Austin, but they're leaving those cities to come back home to Memphis because that's where they feel comfortable. That's where they know home is, and that's where their roots are. And that credibility, that, I hate to use the word authenticity, but that authenticity, that unique nature, I mean, so many other places and cities try to fake and fabricate that, and we have it. And so it wasn't just the stories that weren't being told, it was also the feel that you get walking down the street. Literally my first day here, a woman came up to me, I was walking to my first meeting, and she said, "Sir, I hope you have a blessed day." That doesn't happen everywhere. And I think
most cities you try to ignore contact communication. You're just walking forward because if someone comes at you, you're like, "What do you want? What do you need?"
Yeah.
To your point, just the fact that like a genuine, just hope you have a blessed day, and then walk on. Or they ask you questions, they don't want anything from you, they just want to get to know you. That's rare.
Yeah, it is rare and it is special, and that is why I am so incredibly proud to call myself a Memphian, and literally just to help do my part, working with everybody across this community to help tell those stories.
Well, and I feel like, we talk about it on our end all the time, is just the fact that you do have a top 50 market, but the small kind of the connectivity of being able to connect in where people like Rob Carter, who, is the right hand, so to speak, for Fred Smith, is serving on boards of entrepreneurs and helping them physically, serving and helping with them. And Bill Rhodes, the CEO of AutoZone, who's showing up to volunteer days and washing kids' feet and giving new socks and shoes. Mm-hmm. And you have the power to be able to get to know these individuals. And if you have a servant's heart, you're going to meet these people. And
exactly.
To your point, usually in a larger city, you don't have access to those sort of people.
Yeah.
And I just think you have global resources here. You have every opportunity. You have low cost of living, low commute time, really amazing opportunities to create change. So if that's where your heart leads, you have to be in Memphis.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the first things we had to do here was to not define. I actually think the best brand work is about uncovering, not creating, right? And so there's a lot of research to uncover this, but I really believe Memphis is where originality and soul come together to create change. That's how we describe our ethos, right? And those last two words are the most important to us, because it's that originality and soul coming together is what has not only created change throughout our history, yes, changing Memphis, but to change the world. And oh, by the way, we're not done yet. We're going to keep changing the world, and whether you're an artist or an architect, a scientist, a social worker, if you want to change yourself, your family, your community, this city, the world, well, then welcome home. Memphis is the place for you. This city has radiated that for decades, if not longer, and I think it's time that we celebrate that a little bit more. And while we honor our past, it's really an opportunity now to look forward to a new century of soul, if you will.
Put some framework around, because obviously what we're talking about, it can be very large. So how do you start building down into the blocking and tackling, so to speak, of creating this and putting some structure around it and some goals, objectives? Paint a little bit more of a picture on the Memphis Brand Initiative and what your strategic goals are.
Yeah. So we really look at this both through the art and the science. Okay, and I think you have to if you're going to do branding well. And so we measure everything, and think of it simply as kind of the consumer journey. You got to get people to know you, to like you, to love you. So for us, that's relevance, engagement, and impact. We need people to know that, yes, Memphis exists, but this is also what you may want to know about it. 2, engagement, let's get people interacting with us. Sure, that might be visiting, but that might also be sharing stories on social media. That might be visiting and being part of either the Bring Your Soul movement or visiting wearememphis.com. And then finally is impact. Are we seeing more people move to Memphis? Are we seeing millennials come to Memphis and start businesses and careers and jobs? Are we seeing more businesses come? Are we seeing more visitors come? And then most importantly, are we seeing Memphians willing to recommend Memphis? We measure all of that in a very systematic, scientific way. And so we hold ourselves accountable to those metrics. And how do we block and tackle? Well, there's strategy, but then there's getting after it. And so we have this comprehensive mix of levers, I like to say, and it ranges everything from public relations to events to really smart digital work around search engine optimization and marketing to grassroots, to get people understanding, aware, and joining what we call the Bring Your Soul movement, which is bring your heart, bring your passion, bring whatever it is that you want to do to create change in this world. And we're finding a lot of resonance around that. So we're excited.
Because everything you're talking about, it's external and internal, right? So it's promoting, obviously, the city external and around the world. And then you also have, like you said, you're measuring the desired outcomes even among Memphians.
Yeah.
Talk about that kind of balance of trying to work and change perspectives here local, but then obviously market external as well.
Yeah. It is probably one of the more interesting brand challenges I have faced in my career, to be perfectly honest with you. And that is because externally, somewhere to the tune of 90%, people outside of Memphis have a very positive to neutral perception of Memphis. Yeah. Only 10% of people outside of Memphis have a negative perception of Memphis. And when you ask millennials and African Americans specifically, that negativity number actually drops into single digits. Now you come home, and we are incredibly hard on ourselves. Those negativity numbers are actually upside down here. Very high negativity marks. We're less likely to be brand ambassadors of our great city. There are lots of reasons for that, and I don't discount any of those. But we're also seeing improvements, which is exciting. In fact, in the last 7 months, we've seen a 13-point jump in Memphians willing to recommend Memphis as a place to live, work, and play. So that's exciting. That is our work paying off. And I should say it's not just our work. The biggest mission of MBI is the fact that we're a partner. More than anything else, we sit with Memphis Tourism, with the Chamber, with the city, with our nonprofit partners, with the great businesses that are here. And we sit together and collaborate and tell these stories together and work together to move our Memphis story forward. And that's the only way you can create that kind of change. And so one of the most important things that we have to do right now is make sure Memphians realize this is a unique place. This is a special place. And I will say, even in the places we face our darkest problems, poverty, crime, blight, there are amazing minds doing genius things to address those issues. And those issues aren't only here in Memphis. They're in cities around this country and around the world. And those other cities are watching because they see us doing innovative, interesting, smart things to address those problems. And so while we need to work on those systematic, those elements to make our city stronger, we also need to honor those geniuses that are really making change happen on the ground right here in Memphis.
Because I think I want you to elaborate a little bit on just the dynamic. If you travel, and I think the transplants here, you love Memphis. We love it because, like I said, for all the reasons we've been talking about, when you go to other cities, you do realize they're struggling with the same things. And we sit on a lot of these forums, whether it's Pittsburgh, Atlanta, and they're struggling with congestion, blight, education, crime, poverty, homelessness. And I think it does open your eyes to realize we're not in it by ourselves. I mean, these are issues that are being faced around the nation and globally too.
Yeah.
But it's how do you then get people here to have that civic pride? To say, because if you haven't traveled, you only myopically know this is the struggle that I'm facing in my neighborhood. I don't really have a frame of reference outside of that. And, these are the hard times that you're facing personally within. So I want you to carry this forward because when I look at it, I love the fact that you're talking about it's not a solo effort. We're all in this together. We have to work together to lift. So this is a multifaceted, multi-pronged, so many groups working together. But, talk a little bit, dig deeper because, for those who've traveled, when you travel, you realize these are not issues that we just face here in Memphis. These are issues that every city faces. Pittsburgh, Atlanta, Detroit, it's crime, it's education, it's poverty, homelessness. So if you haven't traveled, you haven't necessarily seen that. And if you're only seeing your neighborhood, rightfully so, you're seeing the struggle day in and day out. How do we really, when you talk about even here in Memphis, but other cities, how do you build that civic pride? How do you get to that one person who's kind of the naysayer and doesn't believe, doesn't see it? How do we help to change perspective and pride for our city?
Yeah, and I think this is where it comes really down to the point that This is not about a marketing campaign. This is really about creating a movement. And that means getting everybody involved. And the first thing that we always do is we listen. We listen and we bring our partners around the table, and whether it's our faith-based community and our pastors, or it's our educators, or it is our civic leaders, it's about listening and letting everybody inside the tent and say, this is my Memphis story. This is how I'm part of, this is how I bring my soul to Memphis, right? And allowing for that call to action to take place. I think it's also important to recognize, and I think, I continue to be new to Memphis, and so I learn, and I spend every day learning, but it's important to recognize that we are America's most generous city. In 2017, Inc. magazine ranked Memphis its #1 city on its Opportunity Index. We are the #1 city for Black-owned businesses and entrepreneurs. There are amazing things happening in this city, and the world is noticing, the media is noticing, and we help, shape some of those stories. Many of our partners are helping shape some of those stories. But what we also do is make sure that here at home, Memphians are seeing those stories, because there is a lot to be prideful of here in Memphis. And yes, we have issues, we have problems, but there are amazing things happening, and it's not just us noticing, it's the world as well.
I like what you said, though, too, about listening. I think in many times you referenced earlier the fact that some cities will kind of hide their problems. And I think the fact of just saying, no, we're going to own up to it. We want to listen. We want to make this better. There are groups that are working, and we do need to do a better job of connecting those dots and those resources. But I think the fact of just sitting down and not saying, oh, we're just going to gloss over this. No, we want to work and fix this. I think that's another thing kind of back to the heart that really does make Memphis special. But ultimately, that builds the pride and the hope. I think a lot of this is the hope. They see a bright future for themselves, their family, for our city.
Yeah. One of the most interesting things that we see in our research is that it doesn't matter if you are from New Chicago or Nutbush or Central Gardens or Soulsville or Collierville, people are immensely prideful of their neighborhoods. And that's great. That's amazing. And what we need is that sense of community for us to all come together, no matter what neighborhood you come from. But there are awesome, amazing people in each one of these neighborhoods. And the best communicators start with listening. It's about listening and allowing everybody inside the tent to say, well, this is my reality, right? And as a brand, yes, we have these issues. It would be a huge mistake to try to cover those up and say, well, those don't exist. In fact, one of my biggest fears when I came here is that I'm just meeting with people along Poplar. I can't, as much as I love Poplar, right? Like, we need to be meeting with people in Fraser and in Raleigh and in Soulsville, and making sure that everybody feels part of this experience. And that's why I'm so proud of what we've done with MBI, in that when we create We Are Memphis, and you go to wearememphis.com, you don't see us spend a lot of time talking about attractions. You see us talking about people that are creating change in every single one of our neighborhoods, whether it's out east or downtown, north, south, it doesn't matter. It's about those change agents. It's about real Memphians making real things happen. And I think that is part of the ignition that creates this movement.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right, so give us one last thing before we kind of go into a lightning round that's just fun, quick answers and questions. But give us, when you talk about city building, when you talk about what you're doing, give us one lesson that you've learned through this process already that you think for other cities who want to try to figure this out. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, it's interesting that's already happening. like Tulsa has pinged us, like a couple other, well, how are you doing this? And I really do think it starts with do your homework, do the research, spend the time to do the research. Yes, the anecdotal stuff is important, but be systematic about it. Understand what's happening in your city, and understand what people think outside of your city, and figure out how you marry those two things. And then it's really hard, I think, for people at times to give up control. And in brands especially, I think a lot of times there are, and rightfully so with certain brands, it's, there's a rigidity around this is exactly what we are, and I'm telling you, and it's very prescriptive, and this is exactly how you'll talk about the brand. I'm of a different philosophy. I say let the brand go. Let it go in a way that is productive, but it also allows people to take it to places and in ways that you can never do by yourself. And so for us, my advice is don't be afraid to listen and to let people in. And you may not always like what they have to say, but I'm telling you what they have to say is important. And if you can let them inside the tent and we all end up doing this together, then everybody feels ownership of it versus something that was built off in a corner and you're forcing people to accept it.
Yeah. Good stuff. So let's switch over and do lightning round. These are short questions, short answers, just fun chances to get to know you better. What's a recent movie you've watched? have you been able to find the time to watch it?
Remember, 2 hours of sleep. I have a baby. What is a recent movie that
the soothing sounds of the ocean as I try to fall asleep?
Right. Oh my Lord! I saw the most recent Mission Impossible, which was good. But I need to go see Black Panther. My staff insists upon it, so I'm going to go see that very soon.
What's a recent book you've read?
I like to read. I try not to read a lot of workbook, branding books.
Yeah.
Just I need to separate a little bit. So I actually recently finished the biography, I should say, of Charles Lindbergh because I'm a pilot. So he has an interesting life. We talk about celebrity.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole different back then. It's a different level of celebrity. So I just finished that not too long ago. And my How to Be a Great Father books. Which
very
is very important.
Yes, absolutely. You have that on record. That's good.
My wife heard that. Yeah. Mel, baby, you heard that?
All right, so pilot, what sort of planes fascinate you? Are you more into the old, the biplanes, the P-52s, the Hornets, Tomcats? What's? Give me some planes that you like.
I mean, how do you not love the Tomcat? I mean, that is the prolific, Top Gun. I mean, you just. I like. This is so nerdy. I commercially, will forever love the MD-80. I do not know why, but I love that plane. I think it's quiet up front, and I love the fact there's a row of two. I know it's silly. Personally, I like to fly single engine, planes that let you be a little bit lower to the ground and see the scenery go by. And, there are some beautiful aircraft out there now, whether it's the Pilatus or the Cirrus. And the avionics now are just what you'd find in an airliner. So flying is special these days. Go support your general aviation airports. We have some terrific ones here in Memphis. And my hat's off to the airport commission because they're doing some terrific work, especially with the rehab of our international airport.
Yeah. I like how you work in PSAs and everything, man.
I am here to support. Yeah, I am here. Good. I am Memphis true and blue.
So, give us what do you like to do to relax? I mean, I know right now, obviously, just finding some time to sleep, but what do you like to do to relax? Flying.
Flying actually is very relaxing to me. Playing drums. I actually, if you haven't gone, another plug, Wild Bill's, North Memphis, sat in with the band on last Sunday, which was amazing. So that was a lot of fun.
What kind of music do you like to play?
Oh, all sorts of music. Obviously, I love to play blues. Any type of blues is amazing to me. But I actually played with the band in New York City. We recorded 2 albums. And so we were this Chili Peppers, Dave Matthews fusion kind of thing that was just fun,
So rap awesome. On an acoustic guitar?
No, not so much, but I don't love playing straight 2 and 4. I'll just say that. I like to put a little funk into it. So that is relaxing to me. And then honestly, I love exploring Memphis. I love my neighborhood. I love my neighbors. I love spending time now with my wife and my baby, and when we get to travel and explore the area, whether it's going hiking in Shelby Farms, or I love Overton Park. They're doing terrific work over there. I think for us, every weekend there's something going on here. And so this week, so you can't help but get sucked into that and really appreciate it. And that actually does help me relax. It's a lot of fun.
What's funny, I was going to ask, where do you take the out-of-town guests? But you've covered so many different things throughout this that I think listeners have an idea already.
Yeah.
Just ask you where to go, and you'll give them a whole roadmap.
Reach out. I mean, we not only guest, but we bring media to town, and we work closely with Memphis Tourism and other groups to do that. And what's so great about that is, yes, they love going to see the Ducks in the Peabody, and they love that experience. But I'm telling you, it's when we sit them down for dinner at Itabena, and we put some of our ChangeMakers, like a Rachel Knox or an Ekendayo Bendelli in front of them. I mean, that changes their perception immediately, and the experiences that they have here are amazing. We just had Fast Company and Essence in town, and they were blown away. And so that's part of what we do, is making sure you get that true experience in Memphis that might just take you beyond just the blues and the barbecue.
What's your favorite national park that you think all of us need to go and visit?
Oh, so I spend
Like
a lot of time with the director. You can't. It's like all your children.
We'll
right?
just say, what's one we should go visit?
I would say, I'll give you two. I'll just tell you my two. I think Badlands in South Dakota is a very special place. It's a very spiritual place to me. It's very quiet there, and so I think you have a very unique experience, especially at night. Look up, you might actually see a whole lot of stars, which you wouldn't see otherwise. And then the Flight 93 National Memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, I think is emotional, powerful, and inspirational all at the same time. When you realize those 40 people gave up their lives to do something and to make a statement for the rest of this country, I think that is a story of modern day heroism that can be and will be now, thankfully, to the Park Service told for generations. So I encourage you to check out both of those. And I'm a firm believer that Memphis also needs a national park. So we work on that in all sorts of ways. We have great institutions like the National Civil Rights Museum, which is a one-of-a-kind Smithsonian-level institution, but Claiborne Temple. There are Mason Temple. There are other places in this city that you need to see and experience, because they are part of the tapestry of our country and of this city's history.
Nice. Last two. One is, what do you
so
hope
much for lightning round? I keep
hey, it's fine. We're learning, so it's
less
lightning. Goes with the flow. it's a slow storm. Little sprinkles.
Yeah.
All right. So, obviously, you're making a huge impact. You're creating change with what you're doing. But what do you hope when you look back years from now? What do you hope your legacy is, especially on Memphis?
I think Memphis is, whether I'm here or not, I think Memphis is on the verge of an evolution, a new century. I think, hopefully, with me being here, what I bring to the table is that we're not only able to share that story in a more compelling, comprehensive way, where we're talking about our adaptive reuse of space. The fact that we get stories in the New York Times, like Blight to Bright Lights, like telling those stories in meaningful, powerful ways, but also we're here for a moment in time where Memphians rediscover their city, and not all that it was, but all that it can be, and how they are part of that future. And I think this is a powerful moment in time, and it's why we're really celebrating 2019 as a new century of soul, because it is our moment to, inside each one of us, to take that heart, to take that soul, to take that character and say, this is what we want Memphis to be in our next 100 years. And I would like to look back and say that was a turning point for this community that helped our economy, that helped recruit and retain talent, that made us stronger, that boosted our arts, that boosted our consciousness around race, and also helped us build a city that we all can be proud of, and across the entire community. So, like I said, I don't do that alone in no way, shape, or form, but if I can be part of that solution, even just a small part of that, then I would be immensely grateful and proud.
Last question is the easiest of all. How do we get in touch? How do we follow? You've mentioned the website a couple times throughout, but
the plug.
Talk about website, social media. Where do we all need to go?
I would strongly encourage everybody to join the Bring Your Soul movement. Just whatever that is for you, whatever you are passionate about, whether it is art or politics or music, share your Memphis experiences, share it using the Bring Your Soul hashtag. And what we're seeing taking place is that hashtag has already been used close to 6,000 times in 10 months. And it's a movement. It's a movement for people to express what Memphis means to them. And what's so exciting is now we're seeing it take off in other places and ways and reflecting back well on Memphis. And then I would also obviously encourage everybody to check out wearememphis.com. That is what I consider the place for our community to congregate. It's where we celebrate individuals and neighborhoods and people doing amazing, interesting things. And that website belongs to all of us. If there are things that you'd like to see on that website, you want to participate in a way, become a brand ambassador, you can sign up right there. But there are all sorts of ways to be part of this moment. Even leading into, one more plug, our anniversary, go to mem200.com. See what is happening as we honor our bicentennial as both a city and as a county, and as we think about that next century of soul. But my resounding message is join the movement. Be part of this moment in time, because this is a rare opportunity. This is a rare opportunity to be part of a city that is going through this type of evolution, and to say, I can make a difference. I can stand up, and whatever that is meaningful for you, I can create positive change. And that does not happen in every city, and it certainly doesn't happen at every moment, but we are at that moment in the right city at the right time.
Well, absolutely love and appreciate all you are doing. Thank you for coming on the
Thanks for
podcast.
having
You
me.
are indeed a change maker. So, David, thanks for all you do and for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by City Current and powered by Lipscomb & Pitts Insurance. To learn more about our guests and to share your stories of others leading by example, visit us online at citycurrent.com. Connect with us online using @citycurrent or follow the conversation using the hashtag ChangeMakers. Now, think big, start small, and act now. Be a change maker.